Hello, and welcome to the virtual Scandinavia House for Jonas Mekas, Filming Independence, Lithuania and the Collapse of the USSR. This program is organized by the Lithuanian Cultural Institute and Humboldt Books, curated by Francesco Urbano Ragazzi, in collaboration with Scandinavia House, the Brooklyn Rail, and an anthology film archives, and is presented with support by the Consulate General of Lithuania in New York and the embassies of the Republic of Lithuania in Italy, France, and Israel. Scandinavia House is very honored to host this event on the 30th anniversary of the re-independence of the Lithuanian state. Scandinavia House is one of the leading centers of Nordic culture in the US, and it offers a wide range of programs that illuminate the cultural and vitality of the Nordic community. Since the ties between the Nordics and the Baltic countries are so close, we have been presenting Baltic events at our physical location in New York and in a virtual setting, which includes the New York Baltic Film Festival and the Nordic and Baltic Oscar Contender Series, which is happening now. This event is being recorded and will be made available on our webpage, scandinaviahouse.org, as well as our Scandinavia House YouTube channel, as well as the Lithuanian Cultural Institute and the Anthology Film Archives. Audience members are welcome to submit questions to the panelists in the chat box located at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce our great partner and collaborator, Grażyna. Sorry, Grażyna. I can't say it, my apologies, who is the cultural attaché at the Consulate General of Lithuania in New York. Please welcome Grażyna.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle. And I'm Grażyna Michnevičiūtė. So sorry. Yeah, it's okay. Welcome everyone to the webinar on this historic day. January 13th marks 30 years after the tragic and courageous struggle that led the Lithuanian people to regain their independence. 2 international online panel discussions are dedicated to Jonas Mekas and his last book, which retraces those events from a personal perspective. Titled Lithuania and the Collapse of the USSR, the book originates from a movie by Mekas, which is at the same time a precious historical document and an important piece of avant-garde cinema. When I was rewatching the film Lithuania and the Collapse of the USSR, it brought me back to the January 13th events, and once again reminded me what was happening across the Atlantic. Today, looking back to the events that happened 30 years ago, I realized how all of us in Lithuania were brave and unstoppable in our fight for independence. No one was afraid, as the hunger for freedom was our driving force. And we were enormously lucky to have an incredible, strong leadership that was committed to their decision. I'm very happy that today at this webinar, we have a very special guest, the first head of state of the Republic of Lithuania, Professor Vytautas Landsbergis, who was at the epicenter of our struggle for the independence. Landsbergis described Jonas Mekas' film and book with the following words: Lithuania became part of the American life for some months, for 1 year, for 2 years, and Jonas took it into his evidence, into his camera. Jonas comes as a reminder, and thus present Lithuania as a reminder. Lithuania is a little reminder of every great things. I want to thank my colleagues, Lithuanian culture attachés in Paris, Rome, and Tel Aviv for their collaboration to make this very special online event. And now I would like to present the moderator of this panel, Dr. Joseph Caslis. He is an independent political analyst and lecturer. He received his doctorate in political science from Yale University, taught in academy and worked 14 years in the Balkans and Ukraine as a senior official of the OECE and the United Nations. Joseph has been an active member of the Lithuanian-American community in New York since the early 1980s. So I'm giving the floor to Dr. Joseph Caslis. Jose, you have to unmute yourself. Sorry about that.
Unmute myself. All right. Can you hear me now? Yes? All right. Thank you, Grażyna. Good afternoon to our participants in North America. Good evening to those in Europe and Israel. Thank you for joining us. This webinar discussion covers three distinct but related topics. First, it concerns the recovery of independence by the Lithuanian nation in a desperate but peaceful struggle against overwhelming odds in 1989-1991. The background is that Lithuania and its Baltic neighbors, Latvia and Estonia, were occupied by Soviet troops in June of 1940 because of a secret agreement between Hitler and Stalin. Three sovereign states disappeared from the map of Europe the same week that Nazi troops marched into Paris and were soon forgotten by most of the world. However, the Lithuanians themselves still remembered and nurtured their dream of independence. And the Jonas Mekas film documents how they regained it. The second topic is that our meeting today takes place on the 30th anniversary of the January 13th, 1991 confrontation between thousands of peaceful Lithuanian protesters and elite Soviet troops who took over the radio and television center and the TV tower in Vilnius. 14 Lithuanians died and 500 were injured, beaten, shot at point-blank range, and crushed under tank treads. But it showed Gorbachev that any attempt to quell the independence movement by force would be met by mass resistance, and it would destroy the hopes of reforming the Soviet system. Third, the focal point of this meeting is the filmmaker Jonas Mekas and his film, Lithuania and the Collapse of the USSR. Born in Lithuania, subjected to German forced labor during the war, Jonas Mekas arrived in the United States in 1949 as a young man in his 20s. He settled in New York and became a filmmaker, movie critic, poet, artist, theoretician, and the acknowledged, quote, godfather of American avant-garde cinema, unquote. More than one commentator has used this exact phrase. It was his vision that created the anthology Film Archives in New York City, a showcase and repository for avant-garde films. Most of our panelists knew him and will share some insights about the man and his work. Speaking of our panelists, we have a group of really interesting people with a fascinating variety of interests and achievements in different fields. I will start by introducing Oona Mekas. Oona is the daughter of Jonas Mekas. She is a doula, which I learned a few days ago, is an advisor to mothers both before and after the birth of the child. She's a childbirth educator, a student midwife, an actor, director, writer, literacy advocate, women's health advocate, mother, and general lover of the planet. She's also the chair of the Board of Trustees of Anthology Film Archives. Our next speaker will be Pascal Le Segretan. Pascal is a senior entertainment photographer for Getty Images, based in Paris. In 1990, he started working for Sigma Press and was sent to cover the events in Lithuania. Next, we have Francesco Urbano Ragazzi. Francesco Urbano Ragazzi are a curatorial duo, both of them named Francesco, which worked closely with Jonas Mekas and edited his last book, Lithuania and the Collapse of the USSR. Francesco and Francesco have also curated this two-day event. Finally, Giovanna Silva is a photographer and publisher. She founded the publishing house Humboldt Books in 2012, and she is their editor-in-chief, the directing editor. She published Lithuania and the Collapse of the USSR by Jonas Mekas. Our first speaker will be Professor Vytautas Landsbergis. Is the professor here? Yes. Professor Vytautas Landsbergis was the leader of the Lithuanian independence movement and the first head of state of the reborn Republic of Lithuania. He has many talents and interests, and among them he has written 20 books on politics, history, and music. So I would like to now start with our first speaker. His topic will be to start, Professor Landsbergis will start the discussion with some thoughts concerning the struggle for Lithuanian independence, which the film portrays, and their deeper significance. Professor Landsbergis, please.
Thank you. Hello for everybody. As we are talking about Jonas Mekas first, and what was Lithuania for him, and how Lithuania became a content of his spiritual life presented to Western world or to entire world, I could risk to note that Jonas had two friends of heart. One was very big, fascinating, and sometimes ugly. It was the entire world, especially the political world, the world of politics. What was not in somebody of Mekas, Jonas Mekas, but Lithuania was there. Lithuania was captive nation for decades after the Soviet occupation in 1940. And then in the late 80s and to the beginning of 1990, Lithuania became to go out from this captivity, using his own resoluteness and the historical chance of weakening of Soviet Union as empire of evil. And Lithuanians went to demand that what was stolen should be given back. The stolen was our liberty and our statehood. Of course, master or thief of what was stolen did not want to give back. And finally, massacre of January, exactly 30 years ago. So it was a crossing point for both friendships of heart of Jonas, the entire world and the little native country Lithuania. As those both lines crossed maybe most impressively in this great film of him about Lithuania, about liberation of Lithuania and collapse of the Soviet Union. But what he presented, it was seemingly simple to see and to catch what you see the life of Lithuania in the world of changes, whose world changes. Of course, what Lithuania was striving for was entire restitution of the independent statehood. And it was an instinct and power of life itself. As Jonas was absolutely pro-life all his own life. And as he loved Lithuania, he enjoyed so much. He could say, enjoy, look. But what was running away in a moment from TV screens, he got an idea to catch it, to fix it on film. And therefore, from this little event, what in global scale looked a little, event of Lithuania, became the world event. And Jonas made it possible to look, to see, to feel, and to be in. It is again an important moment for any arts and creation, to be in, to be participant. And maybe to the big question, to be or not to be, what is to be? It is being participant. And I think Jonas considered it so. Being participant affairs in 1989, 1991 especially, and Mr. World began to participate in Lithuania. Jonas catched the moment, this event. And his film is about this event as anybody of you could watch it on screens or may watch now, today, and reminding the times past when it was on screens and what it meant and what it means today. And today we may become and are becoming participants, again participants. And when we are participants of life, that means that we are living. If we don't participate in anything, we are dead. Lithuania was very duly participant then. And it may inspire us, and not only us as well, today. There's some points what I could say, and maybe if we are talking more, maybe something more to say.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor. Would you have the time to answer some questions from the audience?
Of course, please, I will try to do my best.
Okay. Well then, Kyle, do we have Kyle?
There's no questions right now from the audience.
There's no questions right now. In that case, let me first of all encourage the audience members not to be shy and to send in your questions. But one of the things that I am interested in is Oona Mekas film is, among other things, a compilation of American media coverage of the events in which you were intimately involved and leading, I would say. How would you describe how it looked, or were there any things which you think media cannot capture, which were very important, very dramatic, that stay in your memory, and where you say, well, this is very good coverage, but they didn't catch something that I think is very important? Hello? Is it mute? No, I'm unmuted.
Yes, you are. I think we can then continue maybe, and maybe Professor will join because there's some glitches, technical probably glitches.
The most important, open eye, open heart, open mind, presenting it in a very strong manner. Then, what's yeah.
Maybe we should continue then with the panelists, and then Professor maybe can join later with the answers to our questions, right, Joseph?
All right. Then I will move on to Oona Mekas. Oona will share with us some Mekas family activities during these years, activities explaining events in Lithuania to American friends and to the American public, with the goal of engendering support for the Lithuanian independence movement. Oona?
I think this word activity is really interesting, actually. I didn't think of it, especially at the time, as activities to do such things. It was just felt like my duty, maybe. I think one of the reasons I was asked to speak today, other than being Jonas's daughter, is that Gražina found a poster that I had made in high school. I was 16 at the time of these events, urging all of my high school peers to support the struggle that was happening in Lithuania and the other republics. And I remember making these posters, and I remember being really active about it. But it was as an American of Lithuanian heritage, but it's a very interesting word, activity. But like the professor said, you know, if you don't participate, you're not alive. And I think that's one of the things that I really got from my upbringing, was this idea of participation. And it's interesting that when people talk about Jonas Mekas, they call him a filmmaker, and he always said, I'm not a filmmaker, I'm a filmer. And there's a difference, because he was observing. And this film, out of a lot of his films, this is a really good example, is that he was simply observing and just recording, and being a participant by recording. There's a couple things in the book that I also wanted to read from as these examples of being this participant, and also our activities that are, or just, you know, how it was to be an American or an immigrant in the United States in 1990, and him especially as a displaced person coming, but then having his own life and restarting in the United States, and reaching out to these new people who may not have known about what was going on. So the first thing I want to read from is this telegram that he sent to Professorus Landsbergis when he was voted the president of Lithuania. This is a confirmation copy of the following message. Mes su jumis, we are with you.
Yes.
And it's signed by Jonas, Allen Ginsberg, Norman Mailer, Robert Rauschenberg, Hermann Nietzsche, Peter Kubelka, Raymond Abraham, Schult, and some of these people are people who were born in Europe, Richard Foreman, and Yoko Ono. And so there's a copy of this telegram in the book, which I think is really great. It's just like this example of the far reach that he had and how he was able to really rally people. So at the time, I didn't know about this telegram. I mean, I was 16, so I was reaching out to my young friends, and he was reaching out to these people. And it was all in solidarity. And, you know, solidarity is really important. And I think I got that from him. It's very interesting to be doing this.
This telegram
Yeah.
is surprising for me. And now, I did not know about it. Maybe it missed me. But now, thanks your book, I see that wonderful telegram of solidarity and support for newly rebirth Lithuania. Thanks for it. Jonas sometimes had good ideas, no?
Yeah. Yeah, and really radical ideas.
He collected some friends. Yeah. Made this telegram.
Yeah. And it's a really interesting group of people to put together, you know. Yeah. But he reached out to his friends and he said, we have to do this. We have to send our message of solidarity. And then the other thing I wanted to read is this. This is a copy of it. And I don't think we're going to put it up on the screen, but I won't read the whole thing. This is also in the book. It is an op-ed that he wrote in March of 1990. I was speaking to my mother. She actually reminded me about this. It was a big deal. All these archivists holding everything. And it starts out, and this was actually a little bit controversial with some of Jonas's colleagues, because the idea that Lithuania should be free was actually kind of controversial with certain people who were socialists and communists and Stalinists in the United States, believe it or not. So I'm glad that the New York Times published it.
What wonderful is how Jonas catched the point immediately, because in some time later, we always have been given suggestions not to press too much on Gorbachev, not to hurry. Yes, I wait for a better chance or better times. Jonas said, no, my friend, we will not wait. It is enough for us, half of century of slavery.
Yeah, exactly. So it starts, there's an old Lithuanian fairy tale about a young princess kidnapped by a foreign king. The king loves her very much for her beauty, almost as much as Mikhail Gorbachev loves Lithuania for its grain, meat, and seaports. Every time the princess expresses a desire to visit her old parents, the king gives her a pair of shoes to wear down before she can go home. First wooden, then glass, then iron. Now, Gorbachev tells Lithuanians, you'll have to give me 5 years notice and then I'll let you go home. We all know how many beautiful princesses have died young. And that's what we used to say about Lithuania, we being poets and artists, all Lithuanian, in displaced persons camps after World War II. After Yalta, we had very little hope that Lithuania would ever become independent again, but the princess didn't die after all. He goes on to talk about a few other things, and then at the end, he talks about freedom and liberty. I'm sorry. For Germany, for France, for Japan, for the US.
Stop crying, Oona.
Oh, I cry about everything. It's just the way humans should be, right? So, but not for Lithuania. The war in Eastern Europe is ending only now. Can you imagine what this means, a 50-year war? But I have been free for years. It took me a long time to get out of the bent down, humble slave posture. Like the winter cold leaving frozen soil, it took time. No, I didn't grow 1 inch taller. I straightened out. I lifted my spirits up. I was a free man. I was walking free and tall. Liberty is not just an idea. It is very physical. Our very body needs it, experiences it, lives it. Without liberty, it shrinks, it shrivels, it becomes nothing. I think this is just all-encompassing, just this one piece. I mean, my father wrote a lot of stuff in his life, but I think that it really encompasses what he was about. And, you know, we're talking about this film that he made and the book that is based on it and these events that took place, but they're all interconnected and his work is all interconnected. You can't just take this one film alone. You have to look at his whole body of work. And so this particular piece is a little bit different than his normal diary films, but it's still a diary film. And to be able to live with that and learn from that is a really amazing thing. And I'm glad that everybody gets to see this film. It's till the 20th for free, streamed everywhere in the world. And it just gives people a glimpse into history, into one person's framing of that history and these events that, yes, maybe they are little events on a global historical scale, but every single thing is connected. And so, yeah, I mean, I have some more things to say, but, you know, I think I'd like to hear from the others and maybe be able to respond to people. But yeah, the film in itself is just another little piece of work and a displaced person's expression. And so, you know, what we see in the New York Times op-ed and what we see in his films is how somebody is framed by what they go through. And so, you know, him as a displaced person and him experiencing being thrown out of a country that doesn't exist anymore and to come to a new country, this all really feeds his body of work.
Oona, that was a wonderful sharing with us. And I do hope that we will have time for a discussion among the panelists. I saw one developing between you and Professor Landsbergis. And this is the sort of thing that is absolutely wonderful when it happens in person. And I'm delighted to see that it is also possible several thousand miles apart, given new technology. Our next speaker is Pascal Le Segretan. And Pascal will share some of his experiences as a foreign news photographer in Lithuania in 1991. Pascal?
Yeah.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with you my memories on this very tough period for Lithuanian people. And so I'm going to tell you how difficult it was at that time, back to this time 30 years ago. Being a photographer from the West and traveling in the Soviet Union was not an easy thing. So we have all to remember that there was no direct flight between Paris and Vilnius. So we had to travel from Paris to Moscow, then we had to go to Ministry of Foreign Affairs, just to meet people and say what we're going to do in Soviet Union. So I had to go and ask for the permission to go to Vilnius, and so I got the permission, and I took a flight from Moscow to Vilnius on this day, the day where people died in the television tower. So unfortunately, I arrived there late because my flight was delayed in Moscow for 5 hours. So I arrived in Vilnius. I was lost. We all have to remember that there was no internet connection. There was no social media at all. And CNN was just about to start. So I had no news, and the only news and source of information I had was the radio in the taxi on my way to Vilnius from the airport. And the taxi driver told me, well, are you a journalist? I said, yes. From where? I said, Paris. Say, oh, good. So go to television. I said, what television? Yeah, television, tank, he said. I said, okay, so let's go. Can you please drive me there? And the guy drove me there, and it was very late in the evening. And it was quite long way to go there. And when we arrived, I could see the tower, but from far away. The tower was on top of the hill, and there was a huge traffic jam there. You could see ambulance go and people walking. They dropped their car in the middle of the street, and they were all going. So we couldn't go any further. And he dropped me there and said, go and walk. So I walked for like a kilometer, maybe 2 kilometers. And I see thousands of people walking towards this tower. And I was with my cameras around the neck and trying to get pictures. It was dark, it was cold, and people were very silent. I was amazed by this silence around me. But apparently the tanks arrived like 3 or 4 hours before, and they took position on the top of the hill surrounding the tower. So I arrived and I photographed. If Kyle, if you can just put the picture on. So I could see these people crying, and but of course that time there was no digital camera. It was like it was film, and there was very low light. The only light there was there, it was the street light, so it was really low light, and I could catch some few pictures, but I didn't see when the tank arrived, so it was late. But there was a lot of emotion there, and this couple are maybe crying, I don't know, or maybe they missed someone, or but that was a strong picture. And then so I spent like a few hours around the tower, and then there was a time that I had to go back to my taxi driver and go to the hotel, and but I walked back there and I couldn't find the guy, and the guy had all my luggage in the trunk of his car, and the only thing left, it was 2 cameras around my neck, and I had nothing left, so everything was gone. So I was so disappointed, but I tried to find another taxi, drove me back to the hotel, and I was devastated because, you know, I missed the thing. I was too late, and I lost my luggage, and I was supposed to be there for like 2 or 3 weeks. So I don't know, I didn't know how to do, and I was really disappointed in the taxi on my way to the hotel. And when I arrived to the hotel, there was a guy waiting for me with my suitcase in front of the gate. And that was the taxi driver. He knew that I was in this hotel, and he brought me everything back. So I was really happy, and I can say that there is some very honest people in Lithuania, because the guy could have taken away and stole my luggage, but this guy was really cool. So yeah, and then the second picture, so yeah, I had like 1 or 2 hours sleep, and then I said, well, I missed the story when I arrived, you know, because I was late, and I had to go in the next morning around the tower to see what happened. And I could see the tanks, the Red Army soldiers behind the fence, and there was a lot of people coming in and talking to the soldiers, and that was you know, good to show that the tanks were there. And then the next pictures maybe. Yeah, and of course, there was the funeral day. Funeral was huge. There was a lot of people, and that was really something. That was really, this was a lot of emotion, of course, and there was thousands of people, maybe not only from Vilnius, they came from all over Lithuania, maybe, because it was like thousands and thousands of people there. And yeah, so that was really a sad day. This day I remember. So the next picture. Okay, so yeah, I was there for like 2 weeks. But I was working for Newsweek magazine, and my problem was to reach the deadline in New York. I had like only 3 days to shoot pictures in Vilnius, because at that time we had to send the rolls of film through a passenger to Moscow. and then someone had to care and put the envelope to the Paris, to the flight to Paris. So I had only 3 days for me. There was only 3 days to shoot, to show the situation. So I've seen this barricades here around the parliament. And so, yeah, I had only Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday to work before I sent the packet to New York. So next picture. So then I had very few hours sleep during this trip, I remember, because there was, I mean, you had to be everywhere at the same time. There were so many things happening. So you can see here people gathering around the parliament, making fires, because it was, of course, during winter time and it was really cold. It could be maybe minus 15 at night. So I remember these people sitting around fires and singing. They were all singing. That was really, really impressive. Yeah, and next picture. Yeah, again, the young people together with the whole people. Everybody was there, everybody. So everybody was there and sitting around fires and yeah. Next picture. So I went back around the tower station, television station, and there was a lot of people, you know, bringing flowers, and yeah, a lot of people came to this tower to, you know, commemorate that night where 15 people were killed and lost their lives for liberty. So yeah, so next picture we can see, oh, that was in the parliament. So the parliament was, there was a lot of insurgents inside the parliament, and they were there with President Landsbergis. They all were with, you can see sandbags, you can see hunting rifles, and I slept there for like through 2 or 3 nights, I don't remember exactly, but yeah, and so I spent a lot of time with them, and I can say that Lithuanian people were very good with me. They were very good to me. Because they knew that I was from France, and they helped a lot for me to cover this story. I had no problem at all, never with insurgents or with any people in the street, and they were always trying to help me, and that was really nice. And so as you can see, they played chess. By the time Mr. Landsbergis was maybe playing chess with the Kremlin on the 3rd floor. And next picture, yeah, again, you can see people stayed like every day, every night, there was a lot of people there. And as you see, hunting rifles, reading newspaper, and but I can say that I was a bit scared being inside with them, because in my mind I said, well, if Red Army decide to come and get back the parliament, it's going to be a bloodbath, and it's going to be very, very bad. So I was a bit scared to be there, but and next picture.
Yeah.
And this was taken during my second trip to Lithuania with the French Minister of Foreign Affairs, Roland Dumas. So it was in August 91. And yeah, so I traveled with the minister, with the French minister, and he came to congratulate Mr. Landsbergis. And next picture. And Mr. Landsbergis with his wife and his grandson, which is now Minister of Foreign Affairs in Lithuania.
Okay, Grażyna. Okay. Okay. Minister.
Yes. So
Wonderful.
it.
That's wonderful.
Thank you, Mr. President.
So Pascal, I really like the feel of concretely what is happening during historical events, because we get, in general, when we read our history books, we get a summary which is sometimes, leaves out the nuts and bolts, the concrete details of what is going on. And you, as an active eyewitness, have given us a real feel for what it was like to be there on the day that we are commemorating today, on January 13, 30 years ago. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Profesoriau, ar jūs turite gal kokių dar komentarų, kur norėtumėt pasidalinti?
Nu, tiesiog komentarų čia gali būti daug labai. Matyti, I'd like to see.
Sorry, I switched into Lithuanian, my fault. So in English, for the majority of the okay, in English.
Okay. As I think about that, what Jonas Mekas did about Lithuania, about Lithuania's liberation, I see that he touched very great things, but it is always in his creation that they are not no little things. Every smallest thing is very important, is something, a world in itself. And on the same line, Lithuania, looking the small country in the world, became big, became great in its spirit. And Jonas understood it, and he catched the moment. That moment could be catched only once in our life. And he is now with us. I am very grateful for him, and I enjoy his being today with us. His eye, his heart, his mind is in that film, seemingly only catched by camera. But it's much more. Camera, as your eye and your mind, is catching the world. In one side, the whole world is reflected. And it is exactly the wonderfulness of Jonas' work and of this film. Yes.
Excellent. I would like to now turn our attention to two panelists who have done a lot to make Uona Mekas, the work of Jonas Mekas, more known in the international cultural circuit. And they are, of course, Francesco Urbano Ragazzi. Their topic is the film, Lithuania and the Collapse of the USSR, on the international film and contemporary art circuit. Francesco.
Thank you, Joseph. And first of all, I want to say that I'm really happy, we are really happy and honored to be with such a great group of friends. And so thank you for being here. And normally we will probably improvise, but in this case, we feel that it's better to share like so the part of our screen with you and showing some glimpses and a little presentation about Lithuania and the collapse of USSR.
Can you see the full image?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, okay.
Great. So, as you also said, we would like to give just a little framework about Lithuania and the collapse of the USSR. And I would like to start our presentation with a question that seems very easy to answer, but it is not. And the question is, what is Lithuania and the collapse of the USSR? If you read the image on your screen, apparently it's easy to answer. A motion picture by Jonas Mekas. But first of all, it is a series of images that Jonas Mekas filmed on his TV screen from his apartment in Soho, New York. Those images captured the fight for the independence of Lithuania through the newscasts which aired on American TV between 1989 and 1991. Almost 20 years after being filmed in 2008, those images were then edited in a motion picture lasting 4 hours, 44 minutes and 14 seconds. The film is now available also on the Anthology Film Archives website, free of charge until the 20th. So I encourage you to watch the movie. It will be an amazing experience. But on the same year, so again in 2008, the same footage was presented with the same title as a quartet, a 4-channel video installation that splits the movie into 4 parts, which randomly recombine. Jonas also listed all the main characters appearing in the movie on a small leaflet titled Playbill. Here, Jonas describes Lithuania and the collapse of the USSR as a classical Greek drama. The big faces of the politicians appearing on screen seem to him like ancient gods. The people protesting on the streets were the chorus, the collective conscience of society, and Professor Landsbergis was the hero of the play. Then in 2018, Lithuania and the collapse of the USSR materialized in a photographic series composed of 15 film stills. Finally, in 2018, Lithuania and the collapse of the USSR became a book by Jonas Mekas, we curated for Humboldt Books, a book that includes the full transcript of the entire film. And this is important because, as you know, Jonas never wrote a proper script for any of his movies. As Oona said, Jonas simply reacted to life with his camera. So the book is also, in some sense, the first script ever written by Jonas Mekas. Lithuania and the collapse of the USSR is all of these things. A historical document, a movie, a video installation, a photographic series, and a book. It has a history that spans, a history, or better, a life that spans from 1989 to 2019. And this says a lot about how Jonas Mekas worked and how temporality is an important feature to understand his artistic practice. It also says that for Jonas, images were free to live and to travel from one medium to the other. In this sense, Jonas has to be understood not only as a filmmaker, but as an artist who contributed to invent contemporary intermediality. The first project we worked on with Jonas was titled The Internet Saga. It was presented in 2015 on the occasion in conjunction of the Venice Biennale. And thinking about that project today, we still think that one cannot really understand today's internet without knowing Jonas's work and artistic practice.
Well, if you even watch all these portraits collected from Lithuania and the collapse of USSR in the back, you can't, I mean, it's hard to not associate them to our grids of portraits on the grids of Zoom. So some way Jonas is with us, like imagining this kind of landscape. And coming back to the film and to the book and to this intermediate artwork, Lithuania and the collapse of USSR is not just a collection of found footage. Just as the transcription of the book is not the dragging and dropping of the film onto paper. As in all Jonas's diaries, the process is not mechanical. It's the physical screen capture of an ongoing story. It's the participation to its making through filmmaking. Jonas will say it's a kung fu cinema, reacting with the camera to real life. The personal transcription of the facts into new facts. This is not a ready-made, but I will say a daily made, a continuous act of reappropriation. You can feel Jonas's hand, the noises of the studio in Soho, the children, the wife, someone coughing, and sometimes the battery of the camera about to run out. And we don't know if Lithuania will gain back the freedom, if the USSR will fall, and the battery will resist. We don't know what it will be. Some way, like Jonas Mekas, we are displaced. Like him, we are watching the Lithuania from very far, via the TV screen and the distorted signal. From New York, where an exile that began in 1949 has become everyday life. And day by day, moment by moment, together with Jonas, we see what happened. We are watching life go by, as he will say, and it's interesting. Watching and film the present is for Jonas, and maybe for all of us, a way to be present. Present to himself, present to ourselves, present to the world, to history. A way to be present to the present. And projecting the images in a movie, in a photographic series, in an installation, in a book, in a view, in a speech, is like rewriting them and keep moving them. It's reverberating their present in a continuous present, in a perpetual avant-garde, which make the present again, and again, and again, and again. So the diary becomes a book, a film, an exhibition. The little story becomes history. Talking about history, we can. I mean, I was thinking to how a little Baltic nation fight against the giant of the Soviet Empire in Lithuania in the collapse of USSR. It's like David challenging Goliath. And the everyday life of a Lithuanian refugee in New York leads to a creation of a new cinematographic genre, the diary film, maybe the most prolific and diffused nowadays. And also it leads to the foundation of Field Culture magazine and to the New American Cinema Group, to the Filmmakers Cooperative, to the Anthology Film Archives. So all these everyday lives becomes little things, these little fundamental things becomes little fundamental nations made by and made of fearless human beings. And these beings don't have to turn into big powers, big company, big enterprises, big institutions. They can remain human and strong as they are. They just have to be recognized because they are independent, like Lithuania, like cinema, like Jonas, and hopefully, like all of us. But let's hear this from Jonas' voice.
It's not exactly resistance. What happened in Lithuania in 1990, 89, I think the people created, they ignored the Soviet system and they started their own system and ignored completely. So it's not the same as when the independent filmmakers in the 60s started their own film distribution. That if Hollywood, if commercial filmmakers do not like our films and they do not want to distribute them, we will create an alternative distribution center, filmmakers cooperative, and we'll ignore them and we'll go our own way.
In the interview we have just watched, Jonas compares Lithuania and independent cinema. And I think this analogy should be taken seriously because it somehow appears again in an earlier movie by Jonas, Birth of a Nation from 1997. In the movie, we see 170 portraits of independent filmmakers taken with a Bolex camera between 1965 and 1996. Here, again, independent cinema is described as a nation being funded. At this point, we need to ask, what is a nation for Jonas Mekas? What is Jonas's political philosophy? We don't have to forget, indeed, that Jonas studied philosophy since he was very young. In modern philosophy, there are two ways of explaining why humans gather together in a society. The first theory of the first theory is the one elaborated by Thomas Hobbes, who explains the birth of society through fear. Humans, despite being essentially individualistic, are obliged to reunite because they fear other animals, they fear natural forces, and they fear even other humans who might be stronger than they are. I think Jonas discarded this idea completely. The second theory is the one formulated by David Hume, who openly criticized Hobbes on the basis of what the philosopher considered evidences. Hume observed that humans are able to enjoy each other's company, to cooperate in view of a common interest, to take care of their children for a longer time compared to other animals, to feel friendship. In one word, Hume observed that humans are capable of sympathy, which means they are capable of recognizing themselves into someone else. It is precisely this sentiment of sympathy that pushes them together in a society. I believe that Jonas contributed the philosophical tradition that Hume inaugurated. In his view, both the independent filmmakers and the people of Lithuania do not come together because of fear of a greater power, but because of sympathy, because they share a common interest, a common vision of the world. In fact, the New American Cinema Group members are not associated by a common homogeneous aesthetics, but rather by their common love for freedom in moving images. The feelings of fear and sympathy brings me to conclude our presentation thinking about nationalism. Apparently, the name New American Cinema Group defines Jonas's cinema in nationalistic terms. But if you think well, the New American Cinema Group was not American at all. It included displaced persons like Jonas himself, migrants like Peter Kubelka, women like Barbara Rubin, Shirley Clark, or Storm de Hirsch, queers like Gregory Markopoulos and Jack Smith, proletarians, people excluded from the American society. Jonas's idea of nation is therefore anti-nationalistic, and this is true both for the nation of the independent filmmakers and for Lithuania. In the article that Oona read earlier, Jonas also writes, but they still say, I read every day in the newspaper, the Eastern Europeans are too much in a hurry to become free. They are nationalists. They may upset the economic, the political balance of Europe. Stay put, don't rush. No, my friends, Jonas says, neither of the balance of power, nor the economy, nor life itself has any meaning if even one single nation, one person remains enslaved. Only when there is total and absolute respect for the individual and for the freedom of every country, of every culture, can the world then call itself civilized. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very stimulating presentation. Finally, our last panelist is Giovanna Silva. Since we had a stimulating presentation from Milan, we have developed a real craving for reports from Milan, and Giovanna is also talking to us from Milan in Italy, of course. The usual process that has been used, at least in Hollywood, is that you have a book which is popular and then you turn it into a film. Well, Giovanna will be talking about turning a film into a book, and that is the film by Jonas Mekas, Lithuania and the Collapse of the USSR. Giovanna?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for introduction. Yes, it's true. Humboldt Books is a publishing house based on travel experience, let's say, but by chance we are working with artists and filmmakers in transform films in books. I'm the last one tonight, so I will be short also because a lot have been said, but I want also to speak about the book we publish and how we as Humboldt ended up in publishing this book by Jonas Mekas. My path crossed Mekas twice in the past years. In May 2015, I guess, I was in Venice, walking from home to the railway station, and when in front of the Burger King, I saw a sign carrying Mekas' name. And the two things, I mean, the Burger King and Mekas, could not be related in my mind. So they were indeed connected to each other. Inside Palazzo Foscari Contarini, a historical palazzo on the Grand Canal, today a Burger King, by the way, the installation featured a series of new videos realized by Jonas Mekas using a digital camera instead of his usual Bolex. Big windows completely covered with frames where we see private moments of the director, everyday life images, fragments of beauty and happiness, and the summer spent with his family and Jackie Kennedy's children, Yoko Ono and John Lennon, peculiar moments with Dali and many other characters. And in April 2018, so 3 years later, walking around the corridors of MiArt, that is the Milan Art Fair, my attention was caught by 4-channel video installation showing American anchormen and Lithuanian journalists lively discussing, each on different channel. March 11 and 19, Lithuania became the first of the 3 Baltic states to declare independence, initiating the collapse of Soviet Union. The moment I saw the installation, I tried to gather some information on the curators and the artists and the context, and I was told the Lithuanian director and the artist, Jonas Mekas, used his video camera to film the newscast and TV footage aired in the States from 89 to 91, recording how America experienced the fall of the Soviet Union. Mekas left Lithuania in 49. He could only watch the birth of his nation through the news as a displaced person in New York City. As I mentioned, Humboldt is a publishing house based on travel experience, and this is a wonderful story for our publishing house. And I'm also a huge fan of Mekas, so I took the chance to propose to the curators to do, Francesco Urbano Ragazzi, to do a book about this film. Through Gorbachev glasnost and political disclosure, Lithuania only regained independence from the Soviet Union in 1990. It was Landsbergis who guided 50,000 people demonstrating against the invasion, as we saw in the amazing pictures of Pascal. I have to say, I was really touched by the photographs you've shown. And the Soviets surrounded the parliament at the time of Supreme Soviet, and people in the square built barricades while Soviet troops were shooting in the streets. Landsbergis signed the independence of Lithuania and became the first president of the Republic. More than 90% of voters gave a positive answer to the referendum question, do you support Lithuania as an independent democratic republic? I realized so that the two exhibitions, for that I mentioned also Venice, were both curated by Francesco Urbano Ragazzi. And when I decided to approach them and manifest my desire to publish a book about Mekas' work on the collapse of Soviet Union, after a year, maybe more, of teamwork and several edits, with the fundamental help of Lithuanian Cultural Institute, we finally published the book exactly 1 year ago. It was January 2020. We thought that we would present the book all over the world. Unfortunately, 2020 was not the best time for doing book launches, but here we are. And we were supposed, by the way, to present the book in 11th of March in last year, so the anniversary of the independence, but unfortunately it was not possible. Transcript 4 hours, 44 minutes, 14 seconds, Lithuania and the collapse of the USSR, contain a full transcript of the 5-hour-long film, showing the key events of the figures and opinion being voiced on those crucial days. Its structure, as also Francesco Urbano Ragazzi mentioned before, as a Greek tragedy, this will also make us aim to the construction of the film with a hero, Landsbergis, leading the nation to the victory and independence. And we try to be respectful of the thought and the idea of the film itself. The book features also a selection of relevant images, an article published by Mekas on the New York Times that was mentioned also before, and a telegram to others which would say, we are with you, long live independent Lithuania. In the New York Times article, Mekas writes that when the Soviet army rolled into the village of his free and independent Lithuania in 1940, his height on the passport was 5 feet and 8 inches. Then the Germans arrived and he was imprisoned in the Nazi forced labor camp. When the camps were closed, his displaced person passport stayed a height of 5 feet and 7 inches. 20 years later, in New York City, he measured himself for his US passport at the time, and the lost inch had reappeared. He concludes, it was freedom, liberty that made me taller. And I think it's a wonderful and very poetic moment of the article. Every now and then in the film, along with the TV audio, one can hear the voice of Mekas' life, which keeps going on also while he was shooting. And I think it's very important also that he was filming the history of Lithuania, but also his own life as in all his films. And I'm actually not sure there was a part of his life that didn't appear in a film. I recently rewatched for this Reminiscence of a Journey to Lithuania, and in the first part of the film is set in the States, and at a certain moment, he says that he was walking in the Catskill, and for the first time he felt that he was not alone in America. There was a moment in which he forgot home, and that was the beginning of a new home. I am quoting the film, "We are displaced person even today." But then in the second part of the movie, titled 100 Glimpses of Lithuania, 1971, he goes back to Lithuania after 25 years after his departure. And there he meets his mother, his uncle, that was a Protestant former minister, his childhood friends, the trees which didn't exist at the time. And he takes note of this. And the most evident transformation were at the trees itself. This part of the movie is romantic and melancholic to me, and the years now standing make us seem to be integrated in his reality, his family, and he recalls Lithuanian wars, the cherries in his sister's hands, and the friends of another lifetime. He would like to know how the life is going there in the Soviet Lithuania, but do I know about it? Is asking himself, because of course for the last 25 years he was in the US. I'm a displaced person on my way home, in search of my way home. Now I'm sharing briefly the PDF because we were talking about the book, but I think it's also important to let you know how we work on the book itself. Can you see my screen now? Can you? Yes. This is the cover. I'm not the graphic designer of Humboldt, of course, but I worked with Francesco Urbano Ragazzi and the graphic designer to the concept of the book itself. And of course, the cover is very easy. And we just decided that it should be designed as a film strip. So the title is cut on the border of the book as the film strip. And then inside the cover, there is the reproduction of the article that we mentioned before of the New York Times, the article of Mekas. And then there are the texts, beautiful text by Landsbergis, and about and the text of the curators Francesco Urbano Ragazzi. And then I think the most important thing we did was to understand altogether. It was really a teamwork made by Francesco Urbano Ragazzi, Sebastian Mekas, and us as an editorial team, how to structure and to transform a film in a book. That is not easy, because I think always that a book should be something different from the film, but should be also respectful. So in that case, we had a film that was on 4 screen. Here, we have all the transcription of all the comments and all the anchorman speech and everything, and images from the videos. And as you can see, when one of the anchormen or one of the politicians involved in all the process appears, there is his image and the exact timing when they appeared for the whole film. So it's a very long script because it lasts for more than 4 hours. And with all these images that are very, in a way, late 80s, and the images of course, of Lithuania in those days. And then we choose also, since, as Francesco Urbano Ragazzi mentioned, it was structured as a Greek tragedy. So also when I did classical studies in the high school, so I remember that when I studied tragedy, there was always at the very beginning of the book a list of all the protagonists where their name and role in the story was in a way mentioned. So after all the scripts, we decided also to have like a list of images of the characters of the film with their timing and their role on the caption underneath. Then that there were a lot, mainly male, I have to say, but maybe was not. And then as the film became also an installation, we choose some images, some screenshots of the film that for us were especially important for the film itself, for the story and for the film itself. So in the middle of the book, there are screenshots of the film that are about the news and about the anchorman and all the appearance in the film. And then after this, we decided also to translate everything in Lithuanian, because we thought, even if we are based in Italy, so of course maybe the easiest thing would be to translate everything in Italian. I think we should be respectful, and we are very interested in share this book all over the Lithuania, because the Lithuania and the collapse of USSR was the core of the book itself. So the last part of the book is all in Lithuanian. This is transcription of the book, of the script in Lithuanian. And I have to say that it was really, really a pleasure to work all together. For the first time, I think Humboldt Books, the curators and Mekas family made a great job, and I'm very glad that they choose us as a publisher for this book.
Giovanna, thank you very much. It is very interesting how something that Jonas has created lives on and takes on different forms, and it's a living thing. By taking on new forms, it adapts itself and proceeds to reach new people years later. And your report makes it very clear that the book was created with a great deal of sensitivity. I suspected that when I was looking at the book and reading it, but thank you for giving us the inside story. Well, that was the last of the panel reports. The audience has been stimulated. Certainly I, listening to all of you, have been very stimulated and very thankful that we have been able to come together. And now it is time for at least some of the people in the audience who have been able to give vent to their stimulation in the form of questions to the panelists. And now it is time for them to have their say. Kyle, you are the person who has technical knowledge.
I'm here with Professor Landsbergis, not in the panel any longer. I just need to go through the questions to have them for the panelists. Sorry, there was a lot of questions for him specifically. So,
and also there is some for Oona, I think, and also for Francesco at the end.
Can I just respond to something that I heard after I spoke? I think it was, I don't remember who said it, but I was just reminded that I wanted to say, I never realized how important these January events were to my father until much, much later when he made the film, and probably even now more so, even than when he first made the film. You know, when you're living with somebody who's always filming everything, you don't think about what they're filming sometimes. And he was dedicated to filming this every single night. I mean, it's not like streaming things now. It's, you know, you had to sit there and it started at 7, and if you didn't make it, you missed it. And so he would sit there and he was so committed. And I don't think I was aware of that until actually this week when I was preparing for this panel. So I think it's really interesting that, people talked about the displaced person that he was, but that he was still so tied to the place where he was born, because how can you not be? And so that, I wanted to make that clear that this was a huge deal for him. How could it not be to sit there and film that every day over 2 years? Maybe not every day, but yeah.
Here's a question for the panel. And she is wondering if one can make generalizations to the collapse of the USSR and the recent January 6, 2021 occurrence with President Donald Trump in insurrections, hence the merging of the United States Republicans and the Democratic parties.
Anyone in the panel?
Well, am I the only person, Joseph, you're also American-Lithuanian, yeah? So
Yes.
we are the two Americans that might be more affected by the recent events. And since you're the political analyst, it may be interesting to hear what you have to say, but I would be, of course it came to my mind, but at the same time, I don't know if we really need to talk about those events.
Well, what I see is a great deal of difference between the uprising in Lithuania in 1989, 90, and 91, and what has been happening now in Washington. What was happening in Lithuania was based on the will of the vast majority of the Lithuanian people. And they were trying to get the rule of law restored. And that is about as far as I'm going to go now, because I don't want to irritate who knows what percentage of our audience. So that's my opinion, and those who disagree with me, forgive me.
Well, here's a more better question, I guess, for the panel. How did Jonas feel during his lifetime while Lithuania was occupied? I understand he loved Lithuania and he cared for those who went through those hard times, but did he feel any guilt or something because of leaving Lithuania in other people's hands?
Oona, this would be for you.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's fair to speak for him, even though I'm part of his family, I'm his daughter, but I think that there's enough that he wrote about in his memoirs and even in the op-ed that makes it clear what was important to him. And I don't think he ever forgot about the people he left behind. I think that's clear in his writings and his films. But I would never speak for him.
I do know in general that when some of us who are Lithuanian Americans who grew up in America, or the older generation that left during the war, when they returned to Lithuania, there was, at least among some people, and including, close friends, relatives, the thought that, well, you left and we had to stay here and suffer. What's true is true. However, I also think that one should keep in mind that it was not a piece of cake for the people who left. People of Jona generation were were in German forced labor camps, or went through all sorts of other terrible experiences, which did not end when they came to America. There were extraordinarily difficult times to start a new life. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that some of them had no choice, because they knew they were on the KGB in those days was known as the NKVD, on the NKVD list of being deported to Siberia the very same week that the Nazis attacked the Soviet Union. And so to stay in Lithuania after the war would have meant immediate deportation and quite possibly death. So there are all these factors that one has to keep in mind when discussing that particular topic. Kyle?
Yeah, here's a question. We're more asking for comments. They love the idea of the book from the film, and it makes the ideas and the context available to those who do not wish to devote 4 hours of watching the film. She's asking for any comments on that. Is reading the book easier or more helpful, or, you know, merging the two or separating the two mediums to present the ideas better from the book?
Francesco, would you perhaps like to deal with that?
Yes.
The difference between the experience
also from Giovanna, of course. First of all, we want to say watch Jonas's movies, even if they are long, because it is an amazing experience. It's one of the best experiences I have in my life. Really a psychedelic one. It's an experience that's something that really changes you. To pay attention to images and even forget about your body for so long. It will be a very interesting experience. So I encourage you to watch this movie, but also other movies. Coming to the book, I think it gives you the opportunity to be more analytical. Grażyna, for example, told us that she was watching the movie and at the same time reading the script while watching to be sure to catch every nuance of the talk in the movie. So I think it's a good tool, let's say, to understand the movie, to study, to dig deep, both into the movie and into history.
Yeah, I have to also to say that at some way it was difficult because the book started with Jonas. It was with us. We discussed the idea in Paris, and then we had to deal with this without him, and we had to manage this situation. And what I found interesting is the fact that some way it was a sort of how can I say? It was a sort of the team that we created. The friendship of the team was very important. That it was like the heritage of Jonas itself.
Okay. I would just like to add one thought, and that is the environment today for the viewing public is somewhat different from the environment when Jonas first made the film. And I refer, of course, to binge watching. There's so many people who will sit and watch 10 hours of a television series at one sitting. And I agree with you that watching Oona Mekas film is surprisingly easy and pleasant and pleasurable and stimulating. Giovanna, did you want to add something to that? Whoops.
I watched the film for the first time at the MIARTA, as I mentioned before, and then I went through the film many times because since Humboldt Books is a very small publishing house, I remember that summer when we started the process of transforming the film in a book, I had to rewatch the film to take all the screenshots in low-res to send to Francesco to have back the high resolution. And as an editor, probably people that work as an editor knows, sometimes you go through books or films without understanding the meaning of the film, but with more like a kind of a work in mind. So I watch the film in very different ways every time I rewatch the film. For the first time, because I was interested in Mekas. For the second time, because I was interested in the history of Lithuania. And the third time, because I had to edit the film to do the book. I think books and films are two different things. And I think Francesco were right. The film is more immersive, but if you want to have like an analytic and, I mean, really going through all the script, maybe you should read the book. So are two different things. Of course, the concept of the book was based on the film itself, but of reading and watching is something different. I think
Different thing.
Easy to say.
Thank you very much. We are approaching the end of our reserved time on Zoom. Kyle, is there one question remaining that absolutely needs to be asked?
No, I mean, I think what we should do now is talk, this is the first of a two-part webinar. So if someone wants to mention what's happening tomorrow, that would be great. I think our audience would like that.
All right. Well, the second panel discussion in this series will take place tomorrow, January 14th. The topic is Refilming History as Subjective Media Archaeology. The title itself already grabs me. It will again take place at 1 p.m. New York time, which is 7 p.m. in Rome and Paris and Milano, and 8 p.m. in Vilnius and Tel Aviv. And you register for by going to the Brooklyn Rail site. So I would like to thank all the panel members and the audience. This has been a truly memorable event. I am so happy and so grateful that you have participated. I also want to thank the inventors of Zoom and the other technologies which permit the creation of events such as this one, bringing together panelists and audience members from 3 continents. And we sat here, we shared interesting, stimulating information, and we became, at least temporarily, a little mini community. So thank you very much.
And before, sorry to cut you off, before we go, where can you purchase the book? Where's the book available?
You can buy online from our website, and we are mainly distributed in Europe through Idea Books from vice versa. So you can find, I think, easily online, because we don't know where exactly in Lithuania bookstore is available. So I don't know if it's the right answer, but it's true that I'm copy-paste also the web page of the Publishing House, so you have the direct link to this.
And perhaps we will find a way to get the information to the people who have signed up and left their emails with the organizers of this event. So one way or the other, we'll make sure that anyone who is interested will have the opportunity. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. Take care. Have a good evening, and let's stay in touch.
Yeah, and if I can add the last very moment, I just want to thank everyone who helped to happen this event. And also there are so many wonderful comments on the chat that I was reading also, and for Oona and for Pascal, and everyone is waiting for Pascal's book now with the images from Vilnius. And everyone was so touched by Oona's openness and this very kind of sentimental way of talking, and not being afraid to be sentimental, and not being afraid to be open and talking about what happened to us, all of us. So thank you, everyone, and we're looking forward to see you tomorrow. And maybe Francesco's want to add something about the tomorrow's panel, because we have a really great panelists. And then Joseph will finish up this.
Yes, tomorrow's panel will be entirely dedicated to Jonas Mekas' work. So we will be more focused on his artistic practice, always starting from Lithuania and the collapse of the USSR. The panelists will be Lukas Braziskis from New York University, Kelly Taxter from the Jewish Museum, Avi Lubin from Israel, and Philippe Alain Michaud from the Centre Pompidou in Paris. So I hope you will all join us tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you.
And thank you all very much.
And thank you.
Work.
And unless someone has something that they absolutely need to share with us, I hereby declare the session closed. Thank you very much.